I love Warframe. I've spent an embarrassing amount of time and money on this game, but you might be surprised to learn that it has a very unique development history, reaching all the way back to 2004. So with that in mind, let's jump to 2008 and let's play Dark Sector. What the... Alright. So the PC port of Dark Sector is not the best. In order to make 16:9 resolution work properly, you have to go into one of the config files and add a nonsense line in the right place. But you can also change the field of view there, so hey. Now let's play Dark Sector. In 2004, Digital Extremes unveiled a concept video for a single-player sci-fi shooter called Dark Sector that looked a lot like Warframe does today. In 2008, this gritty, modern, supernatural shooter was released. In 2012, Digital Extremes started the closed beta for Warframe, which revisited that old concept sci-fi ideas as a co-op multiplayer game. Which leaves us with this, what has now become the black sheep of the bunch. Not that interesting on its own, I'll admit, but in the context of Warframe, this game takes on an almost archaeological appeal. But I'll explain as we go on. Completing the game once unlocks brutal difficulty, so that's where we'll start.
Все чисто. Продолжаю обход.
I can't do this again.
Just stay focused. Use your training.
I thought I could, but
You're past the point of no return, Hayden. You're already inside the compound. Decisions made.
Are you sure this thing isn't airborne?
It's not, but even if it is, your booster's good for another 6 hours. Now get with it. Plant your charges. Then infiltrate the building.
Well, can't say he doesn't ask questions later. This is our protagonist, Hayden. His last name, which never comes up in the game and you can only really get from the pre-order comic book, is Tenno. Hayden Tenno. In Warframe, the title refers to these exosuits that give you your physical stats and powers. The beings inside them, the characters you're technically playing, are the Tenno, a unique race of warriors with a deliberately muddy origin thanks to the magic of post-cryo-sleep amnesia. Since they share a name with our protagonist in Dark Sector, it's hard not to draw a direct link to say that the events of Dark Sector are not only the origin of the Tenno, but the origin of the world-shaping events that lead up to Warframe. But we'll see about that. The relationship between Dark Sector and Warframe is hard to describe. It's like Warframe is Dark Sector's ancestor, descendant, and distant cousin all at once, and vice versa. It's uniquely odd even for a spiritual sequel, and it makes me wonder, what happened? What survived? And how did we end up with this Gears of War thing? So the controls on the PC version are a little interesting. The approach seems to have been to take all the buttons that did multiple things on the controller and spread them out over many more individual keys. The basic actions all work well enough, but there are some specific key bindings that are kind of out there. Like Z. Why is Z the collect item button? I just don't get it. Here I'm demonstrating, well, I'm actually wasting ammo to make a point about accuracy. I think the point was, the randomness applied to the bullets in this game is a lot more obvious than usual. Headshots are still an instant kill for some enemies, but they're harder to come by than you might think.
Do not approach or attempt to assist in any way someone you suspect to be infected. The infected target has an increased metabolism and hardened exterior. Their flesh continues to harden over time, so decisive action is required. Enferon gas is an effective complement to your arsenal. Enferon is a mild irritant if inhaled by a healthy adult, but applied to the infected target will cause paralysis and death, given sufficient exposure.
The game never says this, but the box blurb explicitly calls this the Technocyte virus, the same thing that creates the infested enemies of Warframe. We'll get into that later once the infected enemies start to show up.
Do not approach or attempt to assist in any way someone you suspect to be infected. The infected target has an increased metabolism and hardened exterior. Their flesh continues to harden over time, so decisive action...
Chair physics! I'm not sure why that stood out to me on this playthrough of all playthroughs, but it did. This game doesn't really make use of random physics objects, so it might be a front-loaded feature kind of thing. So the cover mechanics are pretty standard fare. Side cover, chest high covers, switch covers, sprint out, vault over, you know, the works.
It's not a bite! I scratched myself! Please! I don't want to die!
By the way, I'm the kind of person that likes to prematurely reload after every burst. If that annoys you, I apologize in advance. So now we get a secondary weapon. You get 2 slots, the 1 and 2 keys switch between them, and they're generally classified into primary pistols and secondary rifles. The rifles are always better weapons in terms of raw power, but the pistols get a key advantage in Chapter 2 that'll pretty much shut out the rifles for most of the game. In this game, I think trigger discipline is pretty important for both rifles and pistols. You tend to lose accuracy pretty fast, which can ruin your effectiveness at longer ranges, so firing in short bursts is actually pretty useful, at least right now. So that can happen a lot. Enemies seem to have almost no cues unless they're actually firing at you, so you can sometimes get double ambushed by silent enemies in cover in the same encounter just by advancing forward. I'm not sure if that's bad or genius. Every enemy drops their weapons in this game, and in this first chapter it can get a little ridiculous how much ammo you get. Which is weird, because talking to people I know who've played this game, ammo shortages become a real problem later on. We'll see how that works in Chapter 2, which at this point might as well be when the real game starts. For now, we get as much ammo as we want. Hayden also has 2 different melee attacks, a swipe and a kick. The kick is pretty much only used for smashing boxes. And frankly, regular melee is just not a great idea, especially in brutal mode. I'm avoiding damage by sticking to cover pretty religiously. You saw what happened when I tried to cross open ground with just 1 enemy in the room. So here we see the general rhythm of Dark Sector's gunplay. Take out 1 enemy at a time, and then slowly advance from cover to cover in case there are more ready to spawn or around the next corner. I guess you could say it's a game about tension, which fits the gritty, gruesome horror aspect they're trying to go for. One thing I find kind of weird is that the switch cover mechanic seems to cross a lot more distance than usual. It's like, it doesn't matter how far apart two separate pieces of cover are, if they're on the same axis, you can roll between them. It's actually probably the fastest maneuver in the game, better than the dodge roll. There are some games where you can headshot enemies crouching behind cover. This is not really one of them. So Dark Sector has a very minimal HUD, for instance only showing your ammo when you reload or pick up more. It's a feature it's very proud of if the Steam page is any indication. I think it's another 2008 thing where true-to-life gritty cinematic realism was the cutting edge of games back then. Here I find it kind of unhelpful at times, like it's a bit too minimal.
Hello, Victor.
Thank God you are here. Somehow he knows I sent that message.
I just need to know where Mesner is.
The Lazarian military is working for him now. They've got a chopper coming in. But listen to me. He's trying to get inside the vault. If that happens...
It's done.
Good. It was too dangerous to extract him, and we can't risk bringing the infection back here.
My head is killing me.
You better pull it together. If Mesner gets that infectious material out of Lazaria, it'll spread like the plague.
Just want to get this over with.
So find Mesner. He's the linchpin. Put a bullet through his head.
Dark Sector seems to be very much a product of its time, caught between Gears of War and Call of Duty. It has the exact same sprint behavior as Gears, where the camera goes low to the ground and starts shaking. This first chapter has the most aggressive resemblance, what with its complete grayness and focus on cover-based gunplay. In 2008, I can see this being a sort of soft cold open for the game for the console audience of the time, or perhaps a default state that the rest of the game subverts. But nowadays it just comes across as oppressively bleak and grim. But even that kind of works in character, supposedly. Again, I can't find a source for this other than a rumor that came up during development, but Hayden is from the start supposed to have congenital analgesia, or a superhuman tolerance for pain. It's a kinda cool way to explain why this first level is so cold and grey, and of course why Hayden can do the shooter protagonist thing of not flinching when he's shot. Although now that we're on the subject, there's a lot about Hayden and the current situation that goes mostly unsaid throughout the game. There are a couple of supplemental sources of information. There's a comic that you get as a pre-order bonus that adds a little backstory that's really hard to find these days. The box blurb, or the Steam page nowadays, adds a couple of details that the game forgets to mention, like the name of the technocyte virus. But for the most part, the game speaks in broad, vague terms and assumes that you can piece together the rest, or that the rest just isn't that important. And to be honest, it's probably not. So now we're up against an attack helicopter, the staple of modern military action games. Man versus giant flying machine beast. When you come out of this room, the first thing the helicopter does is bomb the stairs, I guess so you can't use the room to hide. There are a few soldiers here to harass you with bullets as well, but if you move quickly, you can shoot the truck on the other side of the crates and make it explode, killing all the soldiers around it. It doesn't always work out that way, but it saves some time and trouble if you get lucky, because the helicopter is definitely trouble enough. I think it's called a Kamov, which would make sense, Russian helicopter and all, but I don't have a solid source for that. Whatever, it's an attack helicopter. It's got machine guns and rockets. Naturally, your regular guns are useless, so the key here is to fire homing rockets. You've got the actual launcher sitting near this crate, and a couple of ammo boxes nearby that'll give you full rocket ammo. Explosions in this game are really, really dangerous for Hayden, especially in brutal mode. The explosion radius is a little wonky when it comes to cover, since being at the edge of cover doesn't totally protect you from getting shot, so it's entirely possible to get one-shotted through cover by an explosive. Timing the refill is important so you don't get shot up too much, obviously. Generally, the best advice is to stick around this first big container, since no matter where the helicopter moves, you'll be able to put the container between you and the line of fire. Just wait for it to stop firing for a second, then lock on and shoot. It may take a couple of retries your first time, but there's not much else to it than that. I know there are some games where the helicopter fights get kind of endemic, but thankfully you only have to do this twice in the whole game.
What did they tell you? What did they tell you, Hayden? They said you had gone insane.
But they said the same of you, didn't they? Unstable, psychotic, unfit for duty, and yet they still sent you. In spite of the fact that you are so broken. But I can fix you. Do it.
Wait! Wait! Maybe I do.